In our last episode, I spoke about New Year resolutions and whether or not it's worthy for us to write them down, and how it puts a lot of pressure on people when we have a whole list of things that we purpose to do in a year, and yet at the end of the year we find that we haven't done them. So we spoke about how to reduce the burden and how best to take care of ourselves. Today, I really want to dive deeper into one of the things that most of us choose to do when we are setting resolutions. As we grew up, it was always said that if you wanted to hide anything from an African, put it in a book. So our reading culture has not necessarily been the best. And even going through school, we always read, we crammed literally to pass exams rather than reading to understand. But as you grow older, as we go through university and tertiary institutions, there is a calling for you to read more and more books, especially in the line of work probably that you have chosen. Like if you're a sales professional, you're more inclined to be reading books about marketing and how you can better yourself as a person. And so we always wake up and tell ourselves when the year starts that we want to read more books. And we're so tempted to set timelines and big goals and say, this year, I think I should read maybe 2 books a month and read 24 books. I remember 3 years ago, 2019, I attended Harvest Institute, and every month we were supposed to read 2 books. I think those are the most books I've read in my entire lifetime in a space of 12 months. So out of the 24 books that we were supposed to read, I read about 20 of them. And I thought that after Harvest Institute, I could also carry forward the same culture. Come 2020, and I think I read maybe 4 books. Why? We had the lockdown because of COVID-19, and my friends and I started a literature club, and so we read books every week. We read 1 book every week. When I went back to work, the culture just died. So those are the only books I read that year. Last year, again, I set a target and I said, Muriel, just read 1 book a month, no pressure. And of course, I was very happy to tell the world that this is what I have set for myself, and that at the end of the year, I'm going to have read 12 books. But I can tell you that I only read 6. And I read these 6 books in about 2 months, between November and December. The rest of the year, I was on a chill. I was not even bothered or under any pressure to read any books. So come November, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, you've not read any books. And then the pressure mounts. And I read about 6 books. I read The 4 Loves by C.S. Lewis. I read An American Marriage by Tayari Jones that was recommended by a friend. I read When Women Pray by T.D. Jakes. And If Someone Says You Complete Me, Run by Whoopi Goldberg, to mention but a few. And so this year comes, and I feel like, yes, you read 6 books this last year, but you still need to read. Like it's refreshing when we read books. We increase our knowledge when we read books. It kind of shows you how the world thinks. Some books, because the books that are published in the world are about all sorts of things. There's fiction, there's non-fiction, there's self-help books. So depending on what you choose to read, there's so much that we can learn from the books that we read. So I've always told myself that I'm going to read. And we are about maybe a couple of weeks into the year, and I've only read 1 book, but I've also been reading concurrently. What am I saying here? Sometimes we put ourselves under a lot of pressure. Again, like the New Year resolutions, we also put ourselves under a lot of pressure when we say, I must read this number of books in a year. It's okay to want to read. It's a good thing. Reading is actually very beneficial for each and every one of us. But do not feel pressured to do it because maybe your sister is doing it. Growing up, I have siblings, quite a couple of siblings, and most of my siblings read more than I do. I have a sister who every holiday she'll probably read about 5 books. Yet when I left school and I was on holiday, I was on holiday. I didn't want to read a single book. So you might find that your circle of friends are the kinds that want to read. It could be that maybe what you're studying in school, and so you feel like you should read. I've learned over time that there are better ways of reading and getting ourselves into the culture of being able to read. And those are some of the things that I want to share with you today. So a friend of mine once told me, Muriel, what kind of books do you like to read? And of course, going through school, we loved the Mills and Bones, we loved the Silhouettes. So romance and love were the kind of things that I liked to read. So they say start there. Like, you don't have to start with self-help books. Sometimes we pick up books. I have books in my library that I have said I'm going to read, and I haven't gone past chapter 1 because I don't have interest in those particular books. So start with what you like. You could say, maybe I will read Nora Roberts. Some of us have favorite authors. Start with your favorite author. Start there. And then somehow, as you begin getting into a culture of when do I read, maybe you can program yourself and say, I'll read in the morning, or I'll read in the afternoon, read in the evening. Then you can move on to, let me also slot in maybe a book by another author. Before you know it, once you begin to develop the culture and say that every morning I'm going to read maybe 30 pages, then you can then also bring in the self-help books. I've also learned over time that sometimes it's very, very disinteresting to read one book at the same time. So you'll find that I have a couple of books that I'm reading. Currently, I'm reading The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I was also reading Gay Girl, Good God. Yeah, and I completed that one. But with The Psychology of Money, because it has a bit of graphs, it has a bit of having to understand what the author is speaking about, you take a bit of time. So every day I read about 20 pages from The Psychology of Money, and then you find that I'll read probably 3 or 4 chapters from this other book. So it's also okay to be in between books at whatever time you choose to complete it. It's also fine. Then I also feel like sometimes if you feel that a book is not really what you are looking for, just let it go. Like, why keep it in your library when you know that maybe 6 months from then you will not read it? So sometimes we keep a lot of clutter saying, oh, I'll read this book, and then you never actually get down to reading it. It's okay to quit. It's okay to say that this is not what I was looking for, and you let it go. There'll definitely be another author that has written about the subject in a better way or a nicer way. So some people are narrators, while others are very straightforward, and you have to pay a lot of attention. And I like narrative books. I like reading like I'm reading a story. So even when I'm reading about money, I don't want it to just be pure economics. I want you to tell it in a form of a story. In The Psychology of Money, they talk about luck and risk. Sometimes we think that we make money out of luck, yet it could be that you took risks. So the balance between luck and risk, but also they tell it in a form of a story. They talk about the economic depression. They talk about the world wars, how these have changed the way money works today, how someone's success story in a certain decade may not necessarily apply for you. We are so inclined to read books about all the rich people in the world, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, but their story might be an inspiration for you to do better, but you may not necessarily be able to apply the principles they applied then in the current generation, in the current pandemic, for example. So I like narrative books, and for me, narrative books are books that I can read any day, anytime, anywhere. It could also help if you join maybe a book club, because sometimes when we lack accountability or anyone to report to, then you're not under any pressure to read books. So this year I'm reading with a friend, and when we say we're going to read 20 pages, they read 20 pages, I read 20 pages, and then we come together and discuss at the end of the day. So of course, by the time the day ends, or by the time the clocks 5 p.m. in the evening, I should have read, because then I need to be up for the discussion as well. I've also learned that we have preferences of a kind of books that we like to read. Some people prefer the hardcover books. Some people are really, really well conversant with reading online, but we also have the audiobooks now. You'll most likely find that for any book that is online, there is an audio version of the book, and you could listen to it as you drive to work, knowing that at the end of the day, you have at least covered some ground. So this is some of the things that I am doing differently this year. I'm not putting myself under any pressure. I have not set a target of how many books I want to read. And yeah, one down and a couple of other books to go. I don't know how many, but we'll review at the end of the year and see how far we've gone. I hope I have been helpful. I hope I have added value to your life. If you have a comment, if you'd like to add something to what I have shared, feel free to put it down in the comments. But also remember to like, share, and subscribe. Share this video with your friends, share it with someone that you know needs it, and let's grow the community. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you next time. Bye.